all, way back in, when was it, 1961, they invaded Cuba. And everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world, that all the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They had forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
Buenos días, te tengo buenas noticias.
A woman wasn't sure her mother would understand the historic event that just took place.
Se cayó Fidel Castro. Se cayó Fidel Castro.
But her smile said it all. In 1965, Flora Suarez fled with her family to the U.S. from Cuba after Fidel Castro came to power.
La mejor noticia del mundo te tengo.
Today she is 85 and suffers from Alzheimer's disease. Her daughter Diana wrapped her in the Cuban flag as she told her what she calls the best news in the world. It seems for all the memories and abilities the disease has taken away from Flora, it hasn't taken away her memories of leaving her homeland or the pain Castro has inflicted on so many people.
They had forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
We're celebrating the end of a man who separated so many families throughout the years, a man who killed many, who imprisoned many individuals just for thinking differently and not believing in his revolution, like my father, who was a political prisoner in Cuba for many years. I didn't get to live my early years, my childhood with my father because of Fidel Castro and his regime.
Everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world, that all the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They had forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
My question is this. I'm a business owner, and we just keep getting kicked in the teeth by this administration. It's regulation after regulation and tax upon tax. What Donald Trump does understand is the complexities of business and, to reward the person who takes the risk. So really, my question is, this country was founded on entrepreneurship. Why is this administration so against the business owner? Please tell me.
I don't think this administration, the Obama administration you're referring to, is so against the business owners. When you talk about tax increases, Obama did. I don't know your income, and I'm not concerned about your income. Obama did raise taxes on the top. Excuse me. He raised taxes on the top 1 or 2%. And you know what? I would have gone further.
Business owner. I'm not a multimillionaire. I'm not a billionaire. Okay? I mean, you haven't lived until you put a payroll on your credit card. This is the reality of the backbone of this country. When these rules and regulations come in to cover all of business, and you're trying to start a business, it's tough enough in the gig economy.
I think we should take a hard look at countries like Denmark, Norway, Finland, other countries around the world, which have achieved some enormous gains for the middle class and working families of these countries. We are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all of our people. The only major country that doesn't have paid family and medical leave, sick time for our workers, paid vacation time. Many countries around the world make sure that their young people can get free public college and free tuition at public colleges and universities.
But how can you do that? I mean, you're promising free health care for everybody, college for everybody, paid leave, and you haven't yet said how you're going to pay for it. And you've suggested you would tax the wealthiest Americans, calling for a single-payer health care system. But your own state of Vermont tried that in 2011, and the Democratic governor has said, we can't afford it. And so they rolled it back. Your own state can't even carry it through. How's America going to do it?
Because every other country in the world, in one way or another, does it. I live 100 miles.
Why couldn't Vermont figure it out?
Well, you have to ask the governor for that. I'm not the governor of the state of Vermont. But you can ask the Prime Minister of Canada how they have a single-payer health care system.
Canadians consistently say their #1 issue is health care, and everything about health care is complicated, including the politics. It's administered by provincial governments, but Ottawa sets the guidelines. Among the guarantees of the Canada Health Act, universal access for Canadians. But that doesn't extend to prescription drugs. This is the only industrialized country with universal health insurance that doesn't offer drug coverage. And 1 in 10 Canadians can't afford to pay for their medications. Getting health care can be a challenge for many of us, from long waits at the emergency room to simply trying to find a family doctor. And even if you have one, only about 40% of Canadians say they're able to see their doctors within a couple days of calling.
Canadians love the ER. In fact, we make 16 million visits a year. But we wait, when we do, on average, about 4 hours to see a doctor. 10% wait 8 hours or longer. It's even worse for seniors. Among those 65 and older who require admission, 1 in 10 wait more than 28 hours to get a bed. Canada is ranked last out of 11 leading developed nations for emergency department care. So
you can ask every other major country on earth how they guarantee health care to all of their people, but you can ask the Prime Minister of Canada how they have a single-payer health care system. You can ask how it is that we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs.
But that doesn't extend to prescription drugs. This is the only industrialized country with universal health insurance that doesn't offer drug coverage. And 1 in 10 Canadians can't afford to pay for their medications.
Wages in the United States of America are just too low.
Jobs report, it is a very strong one for the Trump economy. When we look at wages, up about 2.5%. If you look at overall weekly paychecks, those grew about 3% pop.
And the time is long overdue for us to raise the minimum wage.
The current call is for a national $15 an hour minimum wage, more than double the current federal rate of $7.25. A number of cities and states are already there, including New York, California, Washington, D.C., and Seattle. Others are considering it. The left casts the minimum wage debate as a war between employee and employer. But most business owners pay their workers as much as they can. For 17 years, I ran CKE Restaurants. Company and franchise restaurants employed over 75,000 people. But as with most retail businesses, our profit margins were razor thin. Based on my experience, if we adopt the national minimum wage of $15, here's what will happen. A lot of people will lose their jobs or have their hours reduced. According to a 2014 Congressional Budget Office study, just a $10 minimum wage would cost 500,000 jobs as businesses terminate employees. Obviously, far more jobs would be lost at $15 an hour. To survive, employers would have to reduce hours even for workers who manage to keep their jobs. That's a pay cut. A recent report from researchers at the Harvard Business School found that each $1 increase in the minimum wage results in a 4 to 10% increase in the likelihood of restaurants closing. An over $7 an hour increase to $15 would be devastating, not only for restaurants, but for small businesses and their employees. The cost of all workers will have to go up. If you hire a dishwasher at $15 an hour, your cooks will be unhappy with their wages. You're going to have to pay everybody more, which increases labor costs across the board. That's more pressure on profits. Too much pressure and you're out of business. In San Francisco, AQ, a 2012 James Beard Award finalist for the best new restaurant in America, saw rising labor costs drive its profit margins down from 8.5% in 2012 to 1.5% by 2015. So it shut the doors. Jeremy Marin's chain of Cuban restaurants in New York closed 2 locations because of minimum wage increases and has raised prices at the restaurants he's still operating. The minimum wage, he said, is going up too fast. We can't catch our breath. Kevin McNamee is a chiropractor in California. I'll be moving my 2 companies out of Los Angeles, he wrote in a letter to the New York Times. When the city compels me to pay employees $15 an hour, it comes out of my pocket. If a $15 minimum wage doesn't help workers and doesn't help employers, who exactly does it help? Well, maybe just the progressive politicians who manage to mislead voters into believing that it's the right thing to do.
This legislation is a disastrous and unfair piece of legislation which gives huge tax breaks to the people who need it the least, the very, very wealthy. It raises taxes on millions of middle-class families at a time when the middle class is struggling. So it's demagogic to say, oh, you're paying more in taxes. Again, we are the only country on earth that allows private insurance companies to rip us off.
But just to be clear, you are going to raise taxes to do this.
Yes, we will raise taxes We raise your taxes if you're somewhere in the middle of the economy, about $500.
The war in Iraq, a war which I consider to be one of the worst foreign policy blunders in the modern history of our country.
I voted against the war in Iraq. I voted against the war in Iraq.